Hey guys, welcome to Man Medicine, where we talk about how men can optimize their health and escape the collapsing U.S. healthcare system. All right, today, guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about my strength training program. I've gotten a few questions about this, and I've kind of been putting it off. I have not made too many videos about strength training because I'm just not an expert in that field, even though I have been training for, like 35 years. So I still consider myself a bit of an amateur, and I'm still learning things every day about training. So rather than go into like a deep dive on, different types of hypertrophy training, strength training, I'm going to leave that to the PhD experts out there. But I will share with you guys what I do, and I'll explain to you why I do it, because the way that I train is not the best way to train based on the current available evidence, especially if you're looking for maximum hypertrophy, maximum strength. But I think when I explain it to you, you'll probably understand why. And this is a type of training that's pretty popular with my patients because a lot of them have the same issues that I do. And so let's get into that a little bit. So first, let me share with you guys just a little bit about my training background and how I got started. So like a lot of kids in high school, I started picking up the weights. And I immediately I knew that this is something I needed to be doing. It just felt really good. So I played football in high school. I played rugby, but what I really loved was training. I loved lifting, and I didn't know anything about training. I didn't come from a particularly athletic family or athletic background. So, all I had to go on was like Muscle and Fitness, otherwise known as Muscle and Fiction magazine, from Joe Weider, Flex magazine, and just random stuff that I would read from bodybuilders. We didn't even have the internet back then. So I had really no resources. So I had to kind of figure out a lot of stuff on my own. And regardless of that, I still made like pretty good progress. So I came into my freshman year in high school weighing about 135 pounds. And now, granted, I was almost a full year younger than my classmates because I grew up overseas. So they tend to start school a little bit earlier in other countries. So, but having said that, I graduated at about 200 to 205 pounds after 2.5 to 3 years of, relatively serious lifting, even though I really didn't know what I was doing. And I was one of those people, there are people that you run into who, even without lifting weights, you can just tell that they've got fantastic genetics. The classic mesomorphs out there, like the Herschel Walkers of the world. In fact, I remember there was a guy in my high school who really didn't lift weights at all to any significant extent, except for maybe like 6 weeks before football season. But year round, the guy, he looked almost like he could win a local bodybuilding competition, and it was purely genetics. So I was not one of those guys. He was probably one of those like myostatin deficient human beings that they're starting to find now, like the Belgian bulls that were discovered a few years ago. So there are people that are naturally gifted like that. And then, on the other end of the spectrum, there are ectomorphs with an abundance of like slow twitch muscle fibers who they have to work really, really hard for a really long period of time to even look like they work out and to build any kind of, even noticeable muscle hypertrophy. Like a lot of times they can train for years, and in a suit or a jacket or sport coat, you can't even tell that they work out. Well, I was one of the guys kind of in the middle. Like I looked pretty average, but I had the potential to put on a lot of muscle tissue, and that potential was just dormant, kind of waiting for the right stimulus, I guess you could say. Because really, as soon as I started training, I mean, just within a few weeks, there were noticeable differences. And there was about a 4 to 5 year period as a teenager and in through maybe my first 2 years of college where I just gained like 20 to 25 pounds of pretty much solid muscle mass every single year. Those were great times before finally, plateauing out. So I got up to, the heaviest I've ever been was 260 pounds. That was a little too fluffy for me, but by my sophomore, junior year in college, I was walking around at about 250 pounds. I could squat over 600, I could bench over 400, and deadlift over 600 pounds. So there was clearly like some genetic predisposition there that maybe would never have been manifested unless I had started lifting. So regardless, even though I had no idea what I was doing, the stimulus was enough to cause some pretty impressive growth. So I got really big and really strong fairly quickly, and it just sort of came to me naturally. So, and in college and in my last year in high school, I pretty much started adapting my workouts to what I had read in the original Arnold Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, the yellow one, and there's 3 different workouts in there. There's like a beginner, intermediate, and advanced, if I recall. And there's one thing I noticed about my body, even back then, even though, again, I had very little insight into what I was doing. I did really well on the beginner program. I blew up. And then it was like, okay, well, according to the book, I need to move on to the intermediate program. And if you guys are familiar with the way Arnold used to train and what's in that book, it's a very high volume approach. Like even the basic program it's actually a lot more volume than I do currently, and I'll get into that shortly. But I would try my best to go to the intermediate program, and I would just burn out. Within like 6 to 8 weeks, I started having joint pain, and I would get tendonitis, and my strength gains kind of stopped. And I was like, I didn't understand what was going on, like how I'm supposed to go from here to the advanced program, which was like 25 to 35 sets per body part, if I recall. And I thought there's no way that I can do that. So I kept like running into this wall of the intermediate program. I would hit a certain amount of volume and it was just too much for me. And, in hindsight, I was like clearly overtraining. So I kept defaulting back to the beginner program, which, if I recall, was like a 4-day-a-week program with like, I don't know, it was like 5 to 10 sets per body part, something like that. I don't have the book anymore. Otherwise, I would show that to you. But from there, like I experimented with a few other programs. There was, if you guys remember Leo Costa, he had that Big Beyond Belief program, which was like some kind of like Bulgarian burst system, and I did really well on that. But then I started overtraining because there comes a point in that program where the volume like really kicks up, and I hit a wall and I had to back off. But up until I hit that wall, I did really well on it, and then I would experiment with different programs like, that I'd see published in Flex magazine, and that were allegedly the programs of some of these pro bodybuilders, and invariably, I would do well on these programs up to a certain point, and then I would, in hindsight, I would end up overtraining, and I would have to back up on the volume. But still, I was lucky. I was blessed with like pretty good genetics, and I made fairly continual progress, like all the way through. So on average, I said I probably did like a 3-on-1-off program. So, roughly 5 to 6 workouts per week. And they were long workouts. They're like 90 minutes to 2 hours. And I had a couple really good training buddies back then. You guys out there, you know who you are. And we trained really, really hard. We would kill it in the gym for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then I went to the University of Oregon. So we'd go out to Hayward Field out there, and we'd do plyometrics and sprints because we also played on the rugby team. So I could manage all of that, no problem. I recovered really quick. And, those were really good days. Those were really good days, because if I tried to do that now, I'd probably be in a wheelchair. But regardless, I was training at a really, relatively high volume, but I was young, 19, 20 years old. My recovery ability was, especially compared to me now at 50, was amazing. It's amazing what I put my body through back then, and how I could I would just bounce back, no problem. But I had very few demands on my time. I was a pre-med student. I was a science nerd, and really my job, in college, I was just obsessed with getting into medical school, and I was obsessed with squatting 600 pounds and benching 400 pounds and deadlifting 600 pounds, which I was able to achieve by, I think, about my junior year in college. But I did not have much of a social life. The ladies did not take much interest in me, so there wasn't a lot of dating going on. So really, like, I had time to train, and I had time to study physics and organic chemistry and study for the MCAT and all that sort of stuff. So it was great. And then I got into med school, and wow. So, med school, this may surprise some of you guys for me to say this, med school is not that hard. At least the material's not that hard. It is definitely. So the first 2 years are typically in the classroom, like in a traditional curriculum, and then the last 2 years are your clinical rotations, where you work in hospitals and you go on rounds, and that's where you kind of like really start learning how to be a doctor. But the first 2 years are all essentially basic sciences, so just heavy academics, and each individual class. Now, granted, they were graduate level, like biochemistry and anatomy and physiology, so they're a little bit tougher than what I was taking in college, but I was already taking, fairly advanced college courses. The problem was it was the volume. So it was like, I'm not joking, I having to study probably 8 to 10 hours per day in addition to going to class and labs and stuff like that. And that was just to keep up. That was just to keep up with my classmates and just to keep up with the material. It was like the proverbial drinking from the fire hose. So as you can imagine, in that environment, like there's no way that I could train 6 days a week for 2 hours. Like those days were over. So I had to come up with a solution. And I remember I had a roommate in college who had been following the Mike Menzer heavy duty system. And, he told me about it, and I just like immediately wrote it off as like, there's just no way that like a low volume, 1 set per body part to failure, there's no way that that's going to be sufficient. And so I just like wrote it off out of hand. I never even tried it. It seemed ridiculous to me. And at the time, I didn't need to train that way. Even though, to be honest, he was a kind of a hard gainer, but he made pretty good progress on it. But I just ignored it. But I came back to it very quickly in my first year of medical school, because I had to come up with something. So I got the heavy duty book, the original one. There is a heavy duty 2 that's out there, but the workout that I did, the one I'm going to talk with you about, came from the original book. And to be honest with you, I think that workout is superior to the one in the heavy duty 2. I think the frequency of the workouts in heavy duty 2 was it was insufficient, and when I did it, I did not make progress on it. I maintained, but I didn't really make progress. But I was shocked how well I did on this otherwise really low volume heavy duty 1 workout, and wow, it was actually really, really impressive. So just to kind of give you an overview of what that workout looked like, or just in general, some of the principles. So it was HIIT, which you guys have heard of, high intensity training, which I don't know if it was invented by Arthur Jones, who was the guy who came up with all the Nautilus equipment, but he certainly was like really pushing that, and was one of the very early proponents of that kind of training system in the 1970s. And Arthur Jones was a brilliant engineer. The original Nautilus equipment that he designed is still, in my opinion, some of the best training equipment that's ever been made. And I'm lucky enough to be at a gym that still has some of those original pieces. So I get to work out with those. And they're every bit as good, in my opinion, as long as they're maintained properly, because they are getting pretty old. They're like as old as I am at this point. But as long as they're maintained, I mean, they're as good as any of the hammer strength stuff, and in some ways they're superior. So if you ever get a chance to try some of his old some of the old Nautilus stuff, you should totally take it. Like the pullover machine is amazing. There's a bench press that I really like. So anyway, Mike Menzer was a very popular bodybuilder and had a fantastic physique, highly intelligent guy in the 70s and late 70s and early 80s, who hook, line, and sinker like bought into the high intensity training system. And that's, he came up with this heavy duty training system, and he trained clients at the Gold's Gym down in Venice for a number of years before his very untimely death from a myocardial infarction. I think he was only like 48 or 49. Both he and his brother were HIIT advocates, and I heard they died within about a week of each other. His brother had, I forget which kidney disease. He had chronic kidney disease and was a dialysis patient. So, but both have died of, I think, of cardiovascular disease within a week or so of each other. So Mike really popularized this kind of training, and you'll notice like HIIT style training like comes in and out of fashion over the years, and it was really popular for a while. It's pretty much gone away now. I mean, some people still do it. I still do it, and I'll talk about why. But the bulk of the evidence now has basically shown that while it can be useful, and there's some great things about HIIT training, that perhaps a higher volume, more periodized approach is probably superior if you're looking to maximize strength and hypertrophy. I think that's, in a nutshell, kind of where we're at right now, which again doesn't mean that this kind of training is not of value, and I'll explain in a minute here why I continue to do basically this same sort of style of training. So anyway, after Mike Mentzer, then it got popular again with Dorian Yates, who won multiple Mr. Olympia titles, and he styled his training, which you can look up online as I think it's called Blood and Guts, which actually is a great program. It's something that I do recommend sometimes. So he got that popular again, and then it kind of faded away again. Now, the advantages of HIIT training is, and I'll talk about this more with me specifically, but it's very low volume. So we're talking like 1 to 2 sets generally per body part, usually once a week. And one of the big appeals for me is that no matter how tired you are, no matter how bad your day is, how stressed out and fatigued you are, most of us can get it up for one set, one set to failure. Whereas opposed to like an hour and a half workout where you're doing like 10 sets per body part, that's a lot of volume. It's very exhausting mentally, and not only mentally but physically. So, no matter if I'd been up for 30 hours on a trauma shift, I still had enough in me to go. I could do one set to failure, maybe 2, and get in and out of the gym in 20 or 30 minutes. So it was really time efficient for me, which is a huge priority, obviously, and it still is. And so it frees up a lot of time to do other stuff with your life. If you're a busy professional, you got a family, and you have better things to do than be in the gym for 2 hours a day. And quite frankly, it does work. Now, according to the data, it may not work as well as a higher volume, like periodized approach, especially in well-trained, especially like elite athletes. But damn, it still works, And if you're a regular guy in the general population, this is a totally viable way to train. And that's one of the reasons why it keeps coming back, and why you'll still see some people that continue to use it. And then finally, like, I don't know, it's kind of maybe it just depends on your disposition, but I find it to be kind of fun. It, just like getting in there and like hyper focused and aggressive, and like taking your mind to a dark place in order to like gut out sets to complete an utter failure is, I don't know, something cathartic about it, something that I enjoyed, as opposed to just kind of like, I don't know, just going through a set, like going through the motions, and then maybe not having that kind of an intense experience. So I really liked it. Now, the downsides to the whole HIIT philosophy, and again, this is just my opinion. I'm not an expert in this stuff. They have a phobia about overtraining, and Mike Mentzer used to say that basically any additional sets over one set to failure is overtraining. So doing more, and anything more than you need to maximally stimulate muscle growth constitutes overtraining. And I understand where he's coming from on that, but really, like, that's kind of objectively not true. So as a result, they would train perhaps, or the intervals between training sessions, due to this fear of overtraining, would sometimes be too long. And remember, there's a lot that goes into muscle recovery between workouts, and a lot of it is genetic. There are these freaks out there that can recover really quickly. And of course, if your nutrition is really good and your sleep is really good and all these other factors in your life are really good, you can obviously speed up recovery. So, if you're fully recovered after 2 days, but your current HIIT program has you training every 4th day, well, you're missing opportunities there to stimulate growth, and that's one of the problems with HIIT. If you have aspirations of being a competitive bodybuilder, a powerlifter, a strong man, this may not be like year-round the best sort of training system for you. So you may want to look into other alternatives. Renaissance Periodization, Mike Israel's company. If you want to learn more about that kind of training, he's got some really good videos. The guy's really smart, and I believe they have an app that you can download. I'm not sponsored by them. I mean, I'm more of a HIIT guy, so it wouldn't make sense for me to be sponsored by them, but that's okay. Although, a bunch of you guys have written to me and commented in various videos that you think I look like him or he looks like me. I don't know. I just don't see it. I don't know what it is. Although I do have to admit, we both like jiu-jitsu. I think he's a jiu-jitsu brown belt from what I've heard. So that's cool. Oh, and his wife, I think, is a family medicine physician. So that's pretty cool. Kudos to him. But anyway, if you want to learn more about that kind of training, his channel is really good. I think Lane Norton does a lot of stuff. He's mostly like a nutritional biochemist, but he does talk about training as well. And there's countless other, good sources out there. If you want to learn about how to put together a really good periodized program. So if you want to learn that, I'm not your guy. But I will refer you to them because they know what they're talking about. Hey, having said that, I'm going to put up here. This is actually the routine that I used. This got me through 4 years of medical school. Basically this routine here. And this is from the original heavy duty. And I would tweak this periodically because I did compete in powerlifting. So I would do this year round. And then maybe 12 weeks before powerlifting competition, I actually would take a program that I got out of like Powerlifting USA magazine, and I would use that to help me peak with my lifts up before the competition. So unfortunately, I didn't have a coach, which meant that I did a lot of stuff incorrectly, and I probably put a lot of extra wear and tear on my joints, which I'm paying for now. So I wish I'd had a coach back then. But I just had to go with what I had. And so Powerlifting USA had some good articles and gave me a little bit of guidance back then. But regardless, so this is a 3-day split. We'll just go through the first one here just to give you an idea. So, once you've done an adequate warm up, which is kind of nebulous in this system, it's basically like the minimum amount of warming up that you need to do to not get injured. And so it might vary obviously from person to person. You sit down and you do a set of dumbbell flies, cable crossovers, or pec deck. So some sort of a adductor movement, for the chest, and you do that to failure. And then immediately, for example, just throw the dumbbells down. I did dumbbell flies back in the day before my shoulders gave out. And so you do that to failure. So it does kind of require, especially if you're going to use free weights, it really helps to have a spotter there, so you don't end up injuring yourself. And then immediately you will go straight to the incline press, which you've already set up beforehand. So you have to take up 2 pieces of equipment, which some people in busy gyms get a little pissy about. But regardless, you throw your dumbbells down and then you immediately go over with no rest whatsoever, and you gut out as many reps as you can on the incline press, usually shooting for about 8 to 12 repetitions. And then, you take a little breather, you take about 2 minutes off, and then you move on to work your shoulders. And all he has you do for shoulders is lateral raises. Now, I'm going to admit I cheated a little bit. I like military press. So what I would do is a set of military press to failure, supersetted to dumbbell laterals, so that I would hit that front delt and then and hit the the lateral and rear delts supposedly with that movement. And then you take a little break. And you go over and you do, you do bent over dumbbell laterals as well. And then you go on to triceps, and you said you could do a French press, a press down, or a triceps machine. And then you take a little break. I like the French press a lot until about 15 years ago when I started jiu-jitsu basically. And then I started getting raging tricep tendonitis and epicondylitis in both of my elbows. So the the French press was kind of out of the mix there. So to this day, I still have that issue. So I use the typical cable press down, and so that was a good workout for me. And then as you finish with dips, which is a fantastic whole upper chest, shoulder, tricep workout, and dips are like squats for the upper body. So I was really into dips. I'd hang 3 or 4 45-pound plates between a chain belt and just go for it. And then you can see the rest of it there. You can find this online. Obviously, you can buy the book as well. I think it's still available. It may be out of print. I don't know. But this workout, if I was on on point that day, I could get that done in like 25 to 30 minutes, which was great. So I would do this workout, knock it out, and then I'd head home, and then I would study. And the same thing when I was doing my clinical rotations, as long as I wasn't like in the ICU or the SICU, where I was working like ungodly hours. I'll show you the workout that I did for that. If I was working like regular clinic hours, I could still knock this out, and it was great. It gave me plenty of time to study, and I continued to make good gains. In fact, in the first 3 to 4 months on this program, I probably gained 5 to 10 pounds of muscle mass, and I hit my all-time best powerlifting lifts, I believe, directly as a result of this program. So, maybe in hindsight, even with the program I was doing in college, for my physiology, I may have been overtraining, because I got within 3 to 4 months, I put 50 pounds on my squat, 50 pounds on my deadlift, and 40 pounds on my on my bench press. So I had a 650 squat, a 650 deadlift, and a 440 bench. And I know what you guys are thinking. This is completely natural. No gear. I was scared of that stuff. I didn't know anything about it. And I was active duty in the military, so I was like terrified that they might drug test me. So there were no steroids, and we didn't have SARMs back then. So yeah, that was all me back in the day. Okay, now I mentioned, things sometimes in med school and absolutely in residency, you're going to work some ridiculous hours. And you guys may not be aware, but I think it was in 03 or 04, they passed some work hour restrictions for resident physicians and interns. It used to be there were no restrictions, which unfortunately, when I did my first residency, there were no work hour restrictions. So now they can't work more than 80 hours in a week, it's my understanding, and I believe no more than 16 hours at a time in direct patient care. I was just getting warmed up at 16 hours, but kids these days, they got it easy. So, there were times when I was working like 80 to 100, 110 hours a week, usually like intensive care unit, surgical ICU, and labor and delivery was brutal. Babies come at all hours. So we were easily working 80 hours a week on those rotations. And that would be, it'd be like 6 to 8 weeks at a time. There were blocks like that. So when you're working that many hours, you're just in survival mode at that point. And if I could find a program that just allowed me to maintain and not go backwards too far, like I was happy with that. So in the heavy duty book, Menser has this consolidation program, which I'll put up here. It's called the Basic Consolidation Routine. It was just 2 workouts, one every 4 days. Workout A, workout B, and it's just the basics, like heavy compounded movements, no fluff, no small muscle group activity, all just like barbell squat, chin-ups, overhead press, neck extension with a harness. I don't know why I never did the neck stuff. I never had an issue with my neck's always been pretty jacked. So this workout, you could really knock this out in like 20 minutes. And apparently there's people that grow on this. I did not grow on this. But, I did maintain enough. It fulfilled its purpose for me, which was just to survive and maintain and not lose too much muscle tissue when I was working those ridiculous hours. And granted, when you're working that hard, you don't sleep, so you're chronically sleep deprived. Your nutrition is terrible. So there had a lot of things like going against me here, but this program was all I could muster during those times, and it served its purpose. So. Okay, let's talk a little bit of science here. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into the evidence base of different training styles, because again, it's I truly believe I stay in my lane. I'm not an expert in this field, so but I do want to share a few things with you. Over the year, Mike Menser was a brilliant guy, highly intelligent guy, but there are a lot of highly intelligent people that end up being wrong. And he was, granted, he got a lot of things correct, but he was wrong about a lot of things. So one of the big assertions that he had was you have to train to failure. It was like a threshold. If you stopped your set before muscular failure, he would imply that you get nothing out of that set. Like you might as well have not done it. And we know that just like the evidence is overwhelming that that's not true. So this is a pretty cool curve here. So this is from Mike Israetel's book, Scientific Principles of Hypertrophy. I think you can get it at Renaissance Periodization. So I want to give credit to him for this. But it's like beautifully simple, and it explains this idea perfectly. So he talks about reps in reserve. So if you can do a given weight, let's say you fail at 10 reps, you stop at 9, well, that means you have 1 rep in reserve. So that's what that means. And as you can see here, the muscle growth or the hypertrophy, it goes up, right? So the closer you get to failure, the more muscle growth that you get. But there's a period of diminishing returns here. And so you can see, like, if you stop 1 rep shy of failure, you really haven't lost much at all. If you stop 2 reps shy of failure, you also really haven't lost very much. And even 3 reps shy of failure, according to the literature, you're still getting a great response there. And so certainly if you want to gut out those last 2 to 3 reps and hit failure, you'll get just a little bit more growth out of that. And that's great. And if you want to do that and you like doing that like I do, then yeah, you should totally do that. But don't feel bad if you stop 1, 2, or even 3 reps shy of failure. As long as you otherwise have a really high quality set, you're getting the most out of that set that you possibly can. And that directly contradicts what Menser would roll in his grave if you could hear me saying that right now. But it is a fact. It is a fact. So, and it's good that it is, because I train by myself currently just because my schedule is kind of nuts. And training legs to failure, there's some danger there unless you're using certain machines. Certainly, you can't squat to failure without a spotter. And really, even leg press, you don't want to leg press on a conventional plate loaded leg press to failure, unless you want to have the fire department be called to extract you from this leg press machine when the whole thing comes crashing down on you. So I for safety reasons, I stop my leg press sets, 1, maybe 2 sets shy of failure, just because, I don't want to die. So, so that's good. So I'm not giving up much by not hitting failure when I do these heavy leg movements. Okay, the other assertion that he has is that 1 set to failure is all you need, and any additional sets are not only are they of no benefit, but they constitute a negative. And again, that's just patently untrue. It's been proven to be false at this point. Now, granted, there 20 years ago, and even more recently, there are some pretty good studies out there showing that, especially in novice trainees, so not advanced trainees, but novice trainees, if you're just starting out, you've never lifted weights before, the response you get from 1 set to failure is about the same as you would get from 3 to 5 sets for failure. So this is a great way to train if you're brand new and even intermediate. But the fact is, as you get more and more advanced, you're going to start needing to add more volume in there, at least according to the current literature. So, or you've got to find some other way to up the intensity, but it's very difficult to do that. There are some high intensity techniques, which I'll talk about here just briefly, but you really, you kind of hit a wall there. And the only way to continue improving for many people, not all of them, is to add more volume. I'm going to recommend a book to you guys. It's this one here, Science and Development of Muscle Hypertrophy by Brad Schoenfeld. So Dr. Brad Schoenfeld's a PhD. That guy just cranks out papers. If you go on PubMed, you can just find dozens and dozens of papers that he's cranked out over his career. And they're really good. The guy, I really respect him. He's put out some high quality stuff. He's answered a lot of questions that I've had over the years. So he's kind of my go-to guy when I have a training question. So I highly recommend you get this book. I bought the hard copy here because I wanted to have it on hand. This book is super good, and I highly recommend you guys go out and get it. I think I got it on Amazon. I probably did. Amazon sells everything these days. So, but anyway, that's Brad Schoenfeld's the man. There's a lot of other good researchers too, but he really puts out some good stuff. And this is one paper that I wanted to share with you guys. So, and I've seen some podcasts where he's talked about this too. So this is from the Journal of Sports Medicine 2021, and it's called No Time to Lift, which is me. Designing time-efficient training programs for strength and hypertrophy, a narrative review. He basically breaks it down. If you're not a professional athlete or somebody who aspires to be an elite athlete, and you're kind of a regular schmuck like me, what's the best way to train? How can we maximize our results without having to commit to 2 hours a day at the gym? And he reviews a lot of the literature that's out there in this paper. So it's totally worth looking at if you're interested in that. But I'll summarize it here. And he says, for the vast majority of people, you want to do at least a minimum of 4 sets per body part per week. And, preferably more, maybe 4 to 8 over the course of a week, per body part, to get most of the response that you want to get. Again, it won't be the maximum, but it's going to be pretty close to that. And then with a rep range of like 6 to 15 reps is what he recommends. And we're not talking about like cable isolation movements he recommends, and this makes a lot of sense, compounded movements, multi-joint exercises, so that each set is working multiple body parts. So like an overhead press, or we'll say a bench press, that counts as volume for your chest, obviously your pecs, it counts as volume for your deltoids, and it counts as volume for your triceps. So that's what you want to focus on. And this is basically what I do, up until this day. As I read this article, I've adapted some of this HIIT stuff to reflect a lot of what he recommends in this article. Knowing that volume is one of the key, if not probably the most important overall driver of hypertrophy, if I had to pick it, especially over your career. I want to find ways to increase volume without increasing the amount of time that I spend in the gym, or minimally increasing the amount of time. So he talks about, Dr. Schoenfeld talks about this in that article, but there's ways, there's some techniques that you can use to do that. One of which is like a superset. So that's what I described earlier. So like the dumbbell flies and then immediately going to incline press. So you've, with no rest. So you've condensed you've done 2 sets essentially, but you've compressed those into a much shorter period of time than you would if you had like a 2 or 3 minute rest, which is pretty standard. Drop sets, I do a lot of these. So drop set is you pick your weight, and I tend to use higher reps and lighter weights these days just because I'm kind of orthopedically jacked up, and I don't really have anything to prove anymore by hauling around big heavy weights. But so I might do a set to failure to like 15 reps, and then whatever weight is on the machine, I will cut that down by a third, maybe 50%, and I'll keep going. And then I'll take that to failure. So maybe I'll get out like 5 or 6 more reps. And then if I'm feeling really frisky, I will do even a third drop set. So, in a way there, like I've added a whole bunch of volume, maybe not quite as much for 3 individual sets, but a lot more than just 1 set. And I've compressed that into a relatively short period of time. So that's one way to add some extra volume to your workouts without adding, an inordinate amount of time in the gym. Because the way that I look at training for where I am in life and where I've been in life for a long time, I'm interested in the equation. I think of it mathematically as results over time. I want to maximize my results. So the numerator I want as high as possible, and the denominator, which is time, I want that to be as short as possible. Like I'm a busy guy. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I've never wanted to be a bodybuilder. I did love powerlifting back in the day, but like that ship has sailed. So I like to do jiu-jitsu. I do jiu-jitsu now. So I've adapted my training to kind of accommodate that. But that's at 50 years old now, I got a family, I got a young son, like I want to spend time with him. So I don't want to be in the gym for hours and hours a day. And I also, I still want to, like I said, I want to train jiu-jitsu. So I try to train jiu-jitsu at least 3 days per week. And sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Jiu-jitsu is pretty tough on your body when you're old. And it's like I'm never not at least minimally injured to some extent or another. So not all 3 of those days per week in JITS class are hard days. So I might have 2 hard days like I had yesterday, which is why I can hardly move and like hardly turn my neck right now, because I did like a 30-minute round without resting, getting a fresh opponent every 5 minutes. That was fun. And now I'm paying for that. But you know what? I love it. I'm going to keep doing it. I want to still be able to do that, but I still want to keep my gains, right? I worked hard for this, so I want to hold on to what I have. And so this is the kind of training that really works well for me. So I get in and I get out, and it allows me to also, as you get older, like injury avoidance is critical, and it's becoming more and more critical for me as I get older. So again, that's why I don't put myself at risk. I don't actually use free weights at all anymore. Even though I love free weights, I miss squats so much, but I don't do squats because this is what my back looks like. Okay. This is my back here in x-ray. So I have an L5S1 fusion, which unfortunately didn't take. So it's being held together by hardware. I eventually am going to need a revision on it. So, yeah, I don't want to end up in a diaper and needing a catheter by exploding my lower back doing squats, even though I love squats. And if you can do squats, I think you should do them. Yeah, so I'm extra careful. This is a picture. This is my right knee after I blew my ACL and had a bucket handle meniscus tear that I had surgically repaired. And I only had the meniscus repaired. I chose not to have the ACL repaired, which is maybe a conversation for another time. But where I am in life, I didn't want to go through a whole year of ACL rehab. And so I didn't. So I've got a wonky knee that I've got to be careful of. And again, machines provide, in my opinion, an element of safety there that works well for me. So that's why I train the way that I do. So right now, I roughly have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday lifting split, which corresponds to the days that I'm in jiu-jitsu. I tend to do my lifts right before jiu-jitsu class, which is around noon, except on Wednesdays when I teach in the evenings. So, that may not be the ideal way to do things, because at the end of every Monday and Wednesday and Friday, I am really sore. I'm super fatigued, but I kind of like having the following day kind of completely off from the gym, which is like it is today. So it allows me to spend time with my family. I've got work to do. I've got a video to make for you guys. So I like being off. It's perfectly okay. And I've done this in the past, to do my lifting, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then do jiu-jitsu like Tuesday, Thursday, and then open mat on Saturday. It's just whatever works for you. Right now, that's kind of what I like to do. So I split things up. It's very simple. There's nothing fancy here. On Mondays, I do back and bicep. On Wednesdays, I like to do chest, shoulders, and triceps. And then on Fridays, because legs are so fatiguing for me and so hard, I just have a dedicated leg day. And I won't go into all the exercises that I do, but I basically do, 2 to 3 sets per body part taken to failure at each of these workouts. And because I use heavy compound movements, the volume kind of overlaps, right? So again, on a bench press with the hammer machine that I like, I also get a set of shoulders, and I get a set of triceps. So that counts towards my weekly volume. And this works really well for me. It's hard to make gains over age of 40. It's really hard to make gains after age of 50. So I'm just with this workout, I'm still able to squeak out tiny little victories, little tiny, 1 or 2 ounces of muscle here and there. And honestly, at this stage of my life, I'm totally fine with that. The other thing I like about this kind of training, I kind of forgot to mention this earlier, but I like to keep track of stuff. So I bring with me, and I recommend that you guys do this, I bring this is my little black book, okay? So in here, I record all of my workouts, and I have all the weights and the reps that I do in here. And for me, this is really motivating. One, because I forget what I did the week before, but I get to look at it and be like, okay, I did 100 pounds on a given lift, and I did 14 reps. So this time, I need to do 15. So it's it's very motivating knowing I have a number goal for this set. So it allows me to crank up the intensity. So I recommend that you guys, especially if you're going to train this way, get yourself a little black book and record your workouts. Plus, what's also fun is I still have these from my early 20s. So I get to look and see how strong I used to be, and then cry a little bit when I see how strong I am now. But I have those recorded in these old books that I've got laying around. So it's kind of fun to have that. It's like a little time capsule, a little peek into the past. So does this change if I'm cutting or bulking? So the answer is no. So this workout stays the same. What changes is my diet. So I've actually been trying to lose some weight over the last 4 months. I've lost quite a bit. Some of you guys have commented on that my face is looking kind of skeletal. And it kind of is, so I'm getting ready to start eating again. But, I'll go through phases where I'll do a mini cut, or even, every few years I'll do a more intense cut to try to get in really good shape for whatever reason. It's not like anybody cares around here, but except for me. But the lifting stays the same. I just manipulate the energy, meaning the calories, to achieve that goal. So I don't change anything. It's the same. It's always the same. Okay, guys, so let me wrap this up. I've already gone long enough on this. So my recommendations, I will echo what Dr. Brad Schoenfeld says in his article that I showed you. Minimum of 4 sets per body part once a week. I recommend guys, if you ask me how to train, I recommend most guys train to failure. Now, why would I say that? Knowing that, if you 2 or 3 reps in reserve is essentially the same. I say that because it's really hard to genuinely train to failure. Most guys who think they're training to failure actually do have 1, 2, or even 3 reps in the tank. Like I've heard Dorian Yates say this: if someone put a gun to your head, you probably could squeak out a couple more reps, and that's actual failure. So I tell guys to train to failure because what that really is probably 1 to 3 reps in reserve anyway. So unless you're really advanced and you're really good and you've been doing this for a long time and you know for a fact that you're able to go to failure, obviously that doesn't apply. I recommend strongly that you, especially over the age of 40, that you set your ego aside and avoid injury at all costs. You can't afford setbacks the older you get. So you may want to naturally progress over to machine training, which is perfectly adequate. In my opinion, has a safety margin as long as you still use good form. And then the final thing I'll say is a big part of training is recovery. And, as I alluded to earlier, when I was in my my late teens and early 20s, like recovery was almost instantaneous. And right now it's not so much instantaneous. So this Monday, Wednesday, Friday program that I'm doing, as time goes on and I get older, I'm going to have to insert additional rest days, and I'm probably going to need to do lighter jujitsu days where I just train technique. I don't get with the young college wrestlers and try to murder them and have them try to murder me, which is what happened yesterday, because I'm just not going to be able to have that kind of recovery. So just acknowledge that's just what happens. Like you can still perform at a high level for a long time as you get older, but what starts to give, very quickly, and you'll notice, is your ability to recover from those workouts. So just factor in extra recovery. And again, that's what the HIIT guys are all about. They're all about avoiding overtraining and all about adequate recovery, which is a good thing. So there's a bunch of programs out there. I mentioned the heavy duty, Mentor system, if you want to check that out. The Dorian Yates has his version, Blood and Guts, which is very similar. It's a little bit more volume. There's one called Dog Crap Training, which I've never tried, but is also kind of a high intensity, low volume, type of training system. You're going to see all variations on a theme. So if you want to try this kind of training, even for a little while, one of those programs would be a good place to start. And then you can kind of tweak it to your specific needs. So that's all I have for you guys today. That's how I train. And I do it that way because I'm not a professional athlete. I don't want to be a professional athlete. I want to be fit. I want to be healthy. And I'm a super busy guy with workaholic tendencies. And so I don't want to be in the gym very long. I want to get the most bang for my buck when I'm there. And then I want to get out of there. And then I work ER shifts all hours of the day. Wonderful family that I love to spend time with. I've got a awesome little 1-year-old who's amazing, and I want to spend time with him as much as possible. And I don't want to be in the gym for 2 hours a day anymore, even though it was awesome when I got to do that. I don't consider myself an expert in the realm of training, so I'm always open to learning new things. But this system, I've been doing this now for this is close to 30 years, and it's worked really well for me. And so I don't really plan on changing, but I always like to learn new things that I can talk to my patients about. And so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. All right, until next time, I'll catch you later. Bye. All Man Medicine video and audio has been created and shared online for informational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute the practice of medicine or professional healthcare services of any kind, including the giving of medical advice. I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship has been established. This content is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied upon solely for that purpose either. The only purpose of this content is to present peer-reviewed, research-backed health information for your consideration. As always, rely on the advice and guidance of your personal physician before undertaking any activity presented here, and if in doubt or not comfortable with said activity, practice discretion. Your health is your responsibility and not ours. Finally, I take conflicts of interest seriously. I accept no compensation whatsoever from any private corporations, including pharmaceutical or supplement companies. You can trust that if I recommend a medication, product, or service, it's because I genuinely believe in it and not because I'm being paid to endorse it.